Allison Green Myers, our program director, is here to introduce us.
Great. So I'll say a welcome this afternoon as well to our Illustrator Highlights Foundation Gather. We're grateful to have Pat Cummings host our talk today with Shadra Strickland and Sarah Jung. Pat is an author, illustrator, and teacher. She is an advocate for story in all its forms, through art, words, and through bringing new voices to the page. Thanks for being with us today, Pat.
Very happy to be here.
Shadra Strickland is an illustrator, author, teacher, and agent, which we don't often get to talk about, but we will today. Along with her own stunning illustrations, her own writing, and her own art, Shadra, like Pat, works to help others on their journeys in creating beautiful work for kids and teens. Teaching at MICA, as well as her mentoring through places like the Highlights Foundation, help shape new stories. And on top of all that, as we mentioned, she represents a small number of illustrators and author illustrators at Painted Words Literary, including Sarah Jung. More on Sarah soon. But not before I give Shadra a very big thank you for being with us again this afternoon. It's nice to see you, Shadra.
See you too. It's going to be fun.
Sarah Jung is an illustrator and writer. Her debut picture book, When Father Comes Home, will be released from Scholastic's Orchard Books in the fall of 2020. This vibrantly illustrated book brings child and family together, even when they are apart. I'll place a bookshop link to Sarah's debut so that you can all pre-order the book. Thank you, Sarah, for being with us today. It's so nice to meet you.
Having me.
The Q&A will take place after this great conversation, and please be sure that you place your questions in the Q&A feature. It's always nice to have one spot to go to find out all those burning questions that are created throughout the conversation. Pat and Shadra and Sarah have come together today to talk about relationships in children's literature, more specifically the author-illustrator or the agent-illustrator relationship, but I think they'll probably also be talking about the teacher-student relationship, the mentor-new voice relationship, and maybe even friendships along the way. So thank you to this group of friends. We're so happy to have you with us this afternoon. Let's get started.
Okay. Thank you very much, Allison and George. And yes, this is Turnabout as Fair Play because Shadra, you interviewed me a few weeks back. And yes, now I get to ask the questions and get to be nosy and meet Sarah for the first time. But I also wanted to reiterate what George said. I really hope people do make a donation, even if it's a small donation, because what that fund, the scholarship fund, helps so much with, and that's just one part of what they do, but what it helps so much with is all these students that Shadra and I have who really want to do children's books. They're really into it, but there are limitations to what they can afford to spend. And going to Highlights for any type of a program, participating is just, life-changing. It's career starting. So I really hope people consider that. I wanted to talk to Shadra because it kind of blew my mind when I found out you had turned yourself into an agent. And I was like, how does a person do that? Not having had an agent for like over 40 years and doing picture books, I was not particularly
I remember those
enamored of the idea, because I thought, I can do it myself. And I like to negotiate myself, even though I didn't know what I was doing. I thought of it as fun, and it wasn't until I got an agent I realized, oh, it's like a whole other planet. So Shadra, I can't hear Shadra. Are you muted?
Am I muted? No?
It's just me. I can't hear her too well. Anyway, it's my computer, no doubt. I wanted to start by asking both of you guys about the beginnings. You were in class together, and I wanted to hear a bit about how that evolved. Sarah, how did that evolve? When you were taking the class, did you go there thinking, I want to be a children's book illustrator?
Yeah.
Or was it just another class?
Yeah, no, I went to school with the thought of being a children's book illustrator. I've wanted to, be that since I was a kid. So, and when I found out about that class, I was definitely going in with that intention. And when I met Shadra, she just kind of took me under her wing and like just showed me the ropes. And like I think there was an equal amount of like showing dedication to it, like with the story and just the process. So it was definitely like lucky for me that I met her. Yeah.
It just so happens. Shadra, how do you set up the class? Like when somebody comes in, and I'm assuming that, like my classes, I get a percentage that really have this burning passion to do children's books,
Yeah.
and another percentage that it fit their schedule.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
how do you set up your class? How's it structured?
Yeah, well, fortunately, most of the students that come are really interested in children's books, even if they don't think they want to do it as a career. But there are some who come in right away, like, oh, this is what I want to do. So I structure it by my intro class is sort of building a portfolio that will get you into my advanced class, right? So in the intro class, we work on our first assignment is a wordless picture book. That's the first day. It's like, all right, you're going to finish a wordless picture book in a week and then come back and talk about it. And then we do poetry, we do chapter book illustration, we do concept books. So I really try to like show people like how vast the field is, so they can see like where they can sort of enter the business, and then we go from there. And so towards the end of the semester, we brainstorm and come up with our own story ideas, and then do like, you know, a small, we do thumbnails. We don't have time to do the whole dummy. And then I think 2 samples from that. And so a lot of students that take that class will take that particular project and bring it over into advanced book, which is where we do an entire book for the semester.
Something they can actually submit.
Exactly.
Fabulous. Do
Yeah.
they have to be writers?
No, but I beat it out of them.
Sarah's
not a writer. Look, Sarah came in wanting to be the next Shantan. Like everything was like, I adore Shantan and I want to do this. And so in advanced book, you know, she had this story, and we you know, as a class, we did a pitch in class and booed people who had bad, no, I'm just kidding, we don't boo people. But gave real feedback on the stories, and then they choose one based on the responses and work from there. And but the writing part of it, I don't know what I do. I just make them do it. Just write the story. We read a ton of picture books in class. I'm pretty direct. So Sarah's first draft of back then Father Goose was terrible. So
okay. I am going to give you a moment to rebut this, okay, and show us some of the scars, okay?
Sarah's like my daughter, so I can be harsh. But we had a frank conversation of why it wasn't working, you know, and what does she want to say with this story, and stop skirting around the issue. And so she, you know, rolled up her sleeves and went back and, you know, did what she needed to do, and the story was absolutely beautiful. And a lot of us as illustrators have that writing seed somewhere. It's all creativity and storytelling, right? It's just people are afraid of words sometimes. So
Well, it's interesting that you start with a non-verbal story, because truthfully, when you're putting the pictures together, you're telling a story.
Exactly.
And I've actually had an editor, Barbara Lilicki, I shall name her, who said one time, do the pictures and then go back and put captions to it if you're struggling with the words. Are you finding as an agent that it's easier to work with somebody who's a writer, illustrator, or does it matter?
I wouldn't say easier. I don't want to work with writers solely, because I'm not a writer solely. Like, I think in pictures first, and writers just, they can produce a lot faster than illustrators can, and I don't have the bandwidth to be able to you know, look at that work all the time. So yeah, I only work with illustrators, and illustrators who have a really good sense of storytelling.
Cool. Okay, Sarah, this is your moment. You can reflect. How was it being pummeled into writing, and, you know, and having your story reviewed?
I did want to say, like, what makes Shadra such a remarkable agent was, like, when we were doing those exercises to, like, write stories and stuff like that, the Father Goose, at the time it was called Father Goose, not When Father Comes Home, but that was one of the 3 like brief kind of stories that I wrote for the in-class assignment. And one was about a hedgehog, and one of them was about something else, I don't even remember. And Father Goose was just one of those 3. And Shadra just kind of like recognized something that was there that I didn't even know was there, and then she just kind of like really encouraged me to like search and dig for like what the heart of that story was. And I think if without that encouragement, I definitely would not have, you know, gotten to where it has been, where it is now. So it's all really thanks to like Shadra recognizing that story and like the scene stuff that I couldn't see. So it was definitely like I wouldn't have been able to like dig that up.
Great.
Yeah.
You know, two things come to mind from what you're saying. One is that we have to be able to take criticism and to grow, just to grow, you know, and the fact that you had something that you didn't even see that she recognized that could be shaped into a story, which doesn't mean you throw out the hedgehog. You know what I mean? That's another story, another day, right?
Yeah.
You know, but the other thing was, too, the fact that you worked with her and shaped it. What I found out when I started advising my own students to go looking for agents, there's different kinds of agents.
Right.
You know, there are some who are just basically closers. They'll handle the deal for you, stuff like that. And then there are those who are like kind of massage the story and really, really help you pull it out. And then there are the ones in between, as far as I could tell. So Shadra, you were doing the massaging anyway. So have you turned into that kind of an agent? Do you feel like that's helped you?
Oh yeah, I think as a teacher, that's just who I am. And so I have 4 of my clients, and I'll show you that in the presentation a little bit later. 4 of my clients are former students, and I just signed a new client who is not, but I'm still assigning those exercises like, okay, let's build a portfolio. This is what I do in class. And I always say, even with my students, I'm like, think about this, maybe try this, but take everything with a grain of salt. If my advice doesn't work for you, toss it out the window. Like, I totally, you know, respect your autonomy and your creativity. But sometimes something, if it doesn't work, I'm going to tell you it's not working.
Well, how do you, like, do you have an agent, and how did you go about finding your own agent?
Shall I start the presentation to show you?
Yes, start the engines rolling. Yeah, if that's particularly if that's part of it, because I'm very curious about this change and when that light bulb went on.
Yeah.
You know, when the penny dropped and you said to yourself, you know what, I can do this.
Yeah.
Okay.
It wasn't, I was forced into it.
There's a lot of, you know, pressure going on.
I know, that's my life. Click from start. Okay. So I'm doing a quick intro to my work. Can you see my screens?
Yes, I can.
Okay. So this was work that I was doing in college. A lot of portraits. I was afraid to draw anything other than faces. Wait. Okay. But my influences were people like Tom Feelings, Pat Cummings, and I'm showing some of the older work. I know, Pat, your work doesn't look like this anymore, but Just Us Women was one of my favorite books growing up. And when I got to New York and went to grad school, I essentially stalked Pat and was like, can you please help me? Please be my mentor. Thank goodness she said yes. And so this was some of the work that we worked together on when I was at SBA. I was doing an autobiographical story of a little girl who goes on a trip with her mom. Nothing came of it, but I kept making work. And that's the idea, like just keep making this stuff. So I'm becoming more experimental, working with gouache and watercolor, just trying to develop my own portfolio. And then I stopped taking things so seriously. I'll never forget one piece of advice that you gave to me that I give my students is, remember to have fun. You know, I was working so hard and I was so serious and it was not fun. I hated life. And you told me to remember to have fun.
Let me just say something. Let me just say that I've run into children's with people who are just getting started, and they line up 2 or 3 books, and you get really excited after you get your first contract. Then when you line up 2 or 3, you're like, oh my goodness, I'm going to be able to do this. And then you look up and you've got 4 or 5, and you're feeling oppressed, and you can't leave the house.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean? So my policy is if it ain't fun, you're not doing it right. Yeah.
Yep.
I remember these pieces. It's nice to see them again.
Yeah, and so nothing happened with them in terms of publishing, but most of the experimental work landed in my online shop, which does really well and is a really nice stream of income for me from time to time. So just don't throw that work away. It becomes something, right? So my agent story, I was in New York. I was doing portfolio reviews. This is Stephanie Bart Horvath, who is an art director at HarperCollins and now is a freelance art director. And she liked my work and said, you know, I'll keep you in mind for future projects. And in the meantime, have you thought about getting an agent? And I was like, yeah, sure. I'm not getting any work. Might as well. So she then contacted my agent, Lori, on the right. And Lori called me and asked if I'd be interested in, you know, working together and explain kind of how her business worked and her process. And, you know, we went from there. oddly enough, I was doing a lot of school publishing for them. Not the big project never really came, but I was still promoting myself. And I tell this to my students all the time, even if you have an agent, you still need to be your advocate. You still need to get out there and make connections. So I happened to be at the Society of Illustrators Original Art Show, and I ran into an editor that gave me my very first job out of college. And she told me to come down to the office, and it led me to Bird, my first book, which was the game changer and completely cracked open my career. So these are a few images from Bird. But yeah, that was so important. The funny thing, thank God for my agent. She understands that I work in many different styles and voices. And so she understands that that's sort of a marketing tool. So you have to have that relationship where your agent really gets you and understands what you're trying to do. So this is my latest book, which you can see it highlights in cabin 14. It's all linoleum, whereas the earlier work was watercolor. These are digital pieces now. I'm working on the iPad, on the tablet. These are 2 book covers, a hardcover and paperback for Renee Watson. And this is the team. So this is the origin story of me becoming an agent. I was teaching my class. These are shots from Advanced Book. I take them to New York at the end of the semester to go to publishers and kind of show their work, do portfolio reviews. And we also do talks at the public library for local schools to make them read their stories and have that experience. It's brutal. It's brutal. And so Lori, this is Sarah's class. You can see Sarah to the right over there. Lori signed up a few of my students every year. Like there was always one that she would sign up. And she eventually was like, you should be an agent. You should rep. And I'm like, when am I going to do that? I teach full time. I'm trying to get books done eventually. Like, when am I going to do it? And I said, well, let's try it for a year. And I signed up. So Sarah, the first 3 that you see was that first batch. And then I have like 2 others. One is a former student. Fun fact, they're all Virgos, as am I, which is so weird. But yeah, I'm really drawn to people who do completely different things than I do. You know, I really love quirky storytelling, really heartfelt storytelling. This is me with the Ezra Jack Keats Foundation. I brought that to Baltimore, and I just wanted to show that. And end with this is like, you have to live spherically and in many directions and never lose your childhood enthusiasm, and things will come your way. And that, in a nutshell, is my life as an artist and as an agent. I'm trying to stop sharing. There we go. So that's it. I mean, it's just like, I hate to say right place, right time, but it's just showing up and really like pushing your life forward, leaving the house.
My question, how did you get to Lori in the first place? I mean, how did you get her as an agent?
Stephanie Barth Horvath. She
was the one. She just introduced you.
Yeah, she didn't even, she made a call to Lori, and then Lori called me, and that was it.
I love it. You know, because this is what I found. Like, I had one student at Parsons who had 5 contracts when he left class. Yeah. And you can have any agent you want, pretty much, with that. But once you have a book a deal, you know what I mean? If somebody's interested, it's not that hard to find an agent.
Yeah.
You know, but it's also a question of like doing some research and everything. I'm sure you looked into like Lori's, you know, client list and stuff like that first, right?
I did ask if I could call one of her clients to just kind of get a sense of what that relationship would be like. And I encourage that for anyone that works with an agent, like ask if you can speak to someone that they work with just to get the real deal. Like, what is it like?
Their references.
Exactly. Yelp.
It should be a long-term relationship, you know, and hopefully a pleasant one. So you do need to know.
It's like a marriage, right? Yeah, we've been in this since 2008. So yeah, we've been married for 11 years now. Lori.
But that's a good thing. I know when I was thinking about getting an agent, editors said to me, talk to other editors too, and see how they feel about when your agent is coming, because that person literally represents you. Exactly. And so it's one thing to talk to other illustrators and writers to see what that relationship feels like on that side, but how is it when they walk in the publishing house?
Exactly.
You know? So it is, you know, you got to do your due diligence.
For sure.
Stuff like that. So, okay, Sarah, from your end of it, you're sitting in class, you're working diligently on your book, and those trips sound fabulous. You went on the trip to New York with her. What kind of experience was that, walking into the publishing house and getting all this feedback?
So, I mean, I can show my presentation.
Sure.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm definitely gonna get to that. So,
I found publishers are very open to that too, and that's what I love. is
Yeah.
that, you know, they're very receptive to new talent,
For sure.
despite the firewalls that seem to be up when you go to their websites. It seems to darken our door.
Yeah, so originally called Father Goose, it was a senior thesis I was working on in Shadra's class for advanced book illustration. And so these are like the first like kind of images I made during that class. And as you can see, like the father was a goose, the family was like a Korean family, and I just kind of crunched out like images from there. And with the finished dummy that I had in that class, I ended up going to New York with Shadra. It was definitely an experience. We had one of those days, one day where we went to like 9 different publishing houses. It was a
That was just that was you as my client. So after class, when we signed up, I drugged Sarah and the other Sarah around to the 9. It was an exhausting day, but it worked.
Yeah, so some of the things that the main feedback that I did get from most of the publishing houses were they didn't really understand why just the father was the goose and why not the rest of the family. And like the main reason why that is, it's like a cultural reference with Korean culture. It's called Father Goose when they travel back and forth. So that was like an integral part of the narrative that understood why like it was kind of missing the mark with a few publishing houses. But regardless, I wanted to have both versions prepared to show
Right.
in case they asked that question. So basically right after visiting just a couple, Shadra suggested to me, like, you should probably make another dummy with the whole family as
Hey, Sarah, people are having a hard time hearing you. Is there, Allison, George, is there a way to adjust the volume on your side? I'm not sure what's happening. It's a lot of people in the chat saying they can't hear Sarah.
Can you guys still hear me?
I think it's just, Sarah, I don't know, maybe if you can just move a little closer. I'm not quite sure what else we can do. People can adjust their own volumes, but there's not a technical solution we have on our end.
Okay.
Y'all hear me?
Yeah, this is better.
Okay. So basically I made 2 different dummies just because I didn't want to risk the idea that someone's going to ask about like, why are they all geese again? So I made 2 different versions and I carried those 2 dummies around the next editorial or the next publishing houses. And eventually I met Kate, who is also in the chat, my editor, who was all on board with the original idea of having the father as a goose and the rest of the family as people. But again, like, I do want to highlight that I did have both versions ready, and making dummies is like a process. So you definitely have to be dedicated to like putting in that work, because you know it was definitely worth doing that. And it's interesting now to see the different versions. And this was the final sort of dummy that I worked on, which was brought to the final print for the book. And these are the sketches that I also made for that book, that only the star, the one with the star next to it, was picked up, or was brought to final. So again, it's a lot of process that gets shed. There are layers that you won't see in the book. It's like for any project, so you have to be definitely dedicated to that, which Shadra definitely encouraged along the way. But yeah, and that was brought to sketches and to black and white, which was eventually to final. And this is a spread that's going to be in the final book. It's a moment where, you know, June has like a kind of intimate moment with his father. So this is the original, like, very first final draft that I made in class, in that book class. That was turned into all geese version, which eventually led to the final version that is going to be in the story. So yeah, and these are like the spreads that you see, which you'll be able to read once you purchase it. So yeah.
Did you have to change much on the story though? Because I can understand that if it was a Korean folktale that was based on, or if it was some sensibility like that, it would still have to have like a universal theme to be understood by kids everywhere, right? So
Right.
Did you change the story much, or change the art, or was it both?
So there are definitely like edits that happen when you have the first draft, and like the editor says like, why don't we move this narrative up here? And like there's a little tweaking here and there. Of course, it's different for every editor as well. But for For this one, the main fix for that issue, in case that people miss that reference, there's an author's note inside that explains the reference of the culture. So it just kind of goes into detail of like the history of like fathers who like travel back and forth to provide for their families that reside in Korea, or vice versa, where like the families in America or Canada or wherever else, and the father travels back and forth from Korea. So yeah.
Okay. Question: when you were I guess putting together your portfolio and everything, did you show like a range? Do you have other stories that you're working on as well, or was it like this was the one story and then just loose pictures, or do you have a bunch?
I actually, at the time, I did have a few other stories. I had Mommy Crocodile, if you remember that one, Shadra.
Yeah, I still have that one. Wait, can I ask you to stop sharing your screen since this isn't out yet? It's giving me heart palpitations.
Sorry. Yeah, so we had Mommy Crocodile. I showed along with that story. I think there was another one that I'm vaguely not remembering. But definitely there were other stories that I had with me there. But Father Goose was the one that we were both like very excited about and like really wanted it to see actualized. So there was more commitment with that story, more so than the other ones. Yeah.
Yeah, Shadra, I'm curious about if you can break it down, and you probably can, because I think you're good at articulating this. What exactly was it in her work that made you think, this is marketable? I know publishers who would love this kind of work.
I think based on the demographic within the university, right, and just seeing such a multicultural environment at MICA, and understanding that so many of our students had experienced this, and so many people have families have to be separated so that they can live in one place and have the parents send money and what have you. And I just hadn't seen a story like that, right? And I thought that Sarah's writing is beautiful and the art was beautiful. And it really just touched me. And I feel, for me, I don't work with my head so much as I work with my heart. And so if there's a story that I'm just like, this is it, this is it. I don't know. I just go for it, and not all of my artists are as sort of sensitive. Like there aren't such like heartstring stories. One student is working on a story that is about a piece of toast that thinks it's a dog, right? Like it runs the gamut. It's awesome. It'll come out soon. It's coming out soon. It's so good. So it's just that thing, it's just that thing. And sometimes students surprise me. Sometimes I'll have a student in class and they're doing well, they make an A or what have you, but it just doesn't speak to me personally, or I don't know what I can do to it or who I can take it to. And then they eventually, get their own book deals, or I have no problems also introducing people to other agents. For me, it's like the story needs to be in the world and let's make it happen.
Now here's the thing: when you have an agent, you kind of understand how they help you shape the story.
Right.
But as an illustrator, are you able to step back and say, well, because in your head, you might think, I would use blue right there, or I'd have a shadow over here. How do you separate yourself so that you don't get in her illustrations and try to art direct that?
Oh no, I'm all in it. Oh my God. No, I'm not. I'm not all in it. No, I'm not. I don't think I'm all in. With Sarah shows, when people are working on their illustrations, they usually don't show me till the end, or sometimes I just need a sneak peek. Can you show me one or two samples to whet my appetite? And if there are glaring issues, I'll say something, if the illustrations that they're working on now lack the same sort of excitement or heart that they showed initially, I might have a conversation about some of the things that they're doing differently to kind of understand the process. But other than that, I try to take a step back and let the artist do their thing. Now, if something like, principles and elements, if there's a shadow that's missing and I'm like, hey, and I did that, Sarah, I think on one of the pages where the family's in the airport, I was like, they need a shadow or move the light so that they're in the light. So little things.
Yeah.
Like line editing almost,
Yeah,
So
exactly.
Sarah, when she's giving you all this advice, to what extent, because I'm thinking that, as a new illustrator, you're listening to Shadra, she's been out there, but do you have some inner core that's saying, yes, I'll do this? No, it's staying that way. I mean, do you push back at all?
Honestly, I don't push back, just because I believe what Shadra says, and everything I've done, I achieve thanks to listening to her. So So I think the only thing that I was like pretty dedicated with was keeping the father goose and the rest of the family person. But even with that, like I was like, oh well, just in case someone doesn't like it, I'll make like another version. So it's definitely there are things that I still feel like passionate about, and but sometimes like even I think this is important because when you're starting out, you can't be too stubborn, I think, and you have to realize that you're in a process of being molded.
Right.
So it's important to recognize like yeah, I believe in my story, but that's different from like being open to feedback and change.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because I can see that you held on to the Father Goose part though.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's funny because sometimes it's only when you get some opposition or feedback that you realize where you're going to dig in your heels
Right.
and what's important to you to hold on to.
Yeah.
But your relationship evolved kind of organically right out of class, right? But Sarah, did you do your due diligence? Did you check Shadra out before you signed up as her client? Did you look at other agents?
From what I remember, it was more like I don't know. Correct me if I'm wrong, Shadra, but I think it was like around the same time where she was thinking about being an agent.
Yeah, I wasn't an agent yet.
Yeah. And it was more like a, should we do this together? And then we were both just like, yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, it was good. It was
This
good.
is so odd and unusual.
But what's funny, like back to that, so my relationship with my agent, who is Lori, who owns Painted Words, is very different. You know, Lori takes a hands-off approach with me. I'm very like, please don't talk to me about the work, especially because I have so many things in my head right now. And I don't ask for a lot of advice from my agent. Like I love Lori as my cheerleader and just support. Like the thing that I love about Lori as my agent is the fact that she's always a step ahead, right? It's like, okay, we're doing picture books, but now let's get into apps. Like who has ideas for apps? Like I love that. And Lori was also an educator. So I think it's that sort of like that just creative personality with the agent that speaks to me. But yeah, I don't like people telling me what to do at all when it comes to my work.
I see. Well, tell me about the technical stuff, okay? So when you decided to be an agent and she's your client, do you actually have paperwork between you? Do you have agreements? How do you, or is it a handshake? What happens?
It's a contract. Always
It's a contract.
Yeah,
Uh-oh.
I have a contract with
Okay.
my agency as an agent at large. So I am under contract with the agency. And then Sarah has a contract with the agency. So it's not just with me, it's with Painted Words.
Okay, so does that mean that she can only work with you? What happens if another agent within Painted Words decides that they have this project that she'd be perfect for?
There are three of us in the agency and we're very flexible. So, and I think even before I was an agent, as an illustrator, when jobs would come in and I couldn't take them on because of my schedule, I would always say to Lori, like, hey, try Vanessa or try, whomever, like, there's somebody else in the team that can take this on. So it's a very family feel to it. There is no like, oh, that's my client or you can't touch that. So we all work together. It gets tricky because the three of us have pretty different ideas about stories and what they should be. And Lori is very much the salesperson. Like she knows what will sell. And
Okay.
I am very much the artist. And I'm like, that's too commercial. Like, what about the heart? Let's make it more fine arty. So it's a really interesting and fun approach to bringing stories to life,
So when you have a project in hand that you think is a winner, do you actually have editors in mind, or do you go and discuss it with everybody else, Lori and and figure out where's the best place to take this?
Now I have a relationship with a few editors. And so for me, it's not necessarily, for me, I'll think about a book in terms of, oh, this would be great at this house, right? And then I'll have a conversation with the editors, with Lori and Claire to kind of see who I might be able to send it to.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, now I'm going to ask Sarah first,
Okay.
and then I'm going to check with you, okay? Sarah, how is she at communicating? Because so many people that I talk to will say, my agent doesn't get back to me. I'm waiting to hear from her. How is she at Don't say anything, Shadra. Not yet. How is she at communicating in terms of being responsive?
So Shadra and we have like a pretty like communicative relationship, I want to say. Like we check in on each other, like even if it's not book stuff, like just like, how are you? Let's get dinner, that kind of thing.
Okay.
So I think in that sense, our relationship is probably a little more unique than like other agent illustrator relationships.
Yeah.
But like when we are hanging out having dinner, we at least talk about it once or twice, you know, like what are we talking? So like we have to, because we have that foundation, right? Like
Right. It's a friendship.
right. So
You
really
stay.
yeah.
So Shadra, is it like that with all your clients?
Well, Sarah's unique because she's in the same city, right? And so we hang out. But yeah, I'm a very silly, funny, ridiculous person, and I don't want a relationship with anyone that is strictly business. And even with Lori, like Lori is a friend as well as my agent. Business is business, but I'm very comfortable sharing, you know, my life with my agent as well. So
I love that so much. Yeah.
yeah.
Like, I love that, like kind of like vibrancy. Like even with like that just kind of shaped my attitude as well. Like going into publishing houses with like meeting with editors, like remembering they are human, you know, not like they're an editor, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So that was definitely something I like learned from Shadra.
Good. I think communication is massively important. I'm going to open it up to questions. I just want to say one thing, because not having had an agent for 40 some years,
Yeah.
when I decided to do a middle grade novel, and I thought, I don't need an agent. Who needs an agent? It was like Invasion of the Body Snatchers. You go to sleep at night and you wake up and the next morning you're one of them. When I, got an agent, I was just like, I love agents. I love them, because then you realize what they can do, and when my agent was talking about, we're going to, I was like, yes, let's go with this publisher. She was like, well, we're going to take it to auction. I was like, auction?
What's that?
I don't know anything. I've never, there's all the stuff you can't do for yourself. Right. And I think I told you, Shadra, my early experience with an agent was with Dillis Evans.
Yeah.
She wasn't my agent, but we went to a show together in Rochester, New York, when the snow was like 5 feet high, and the driver pulled up to this gallery and was going to let us out. And Dillis said to the driver, Miss Cummings cannot walk through the snow. And I thought, Miss Cummings can't? Because Miss Cummings always does, But I thought, this is what's having an agent is like. You're under this soft feathered wing where they take care of so many things for you, And so then I realized I love this. So before we go to the questions, I just wanted to ask you, what happens with other projects? Because now I've gotten to the point where sometimes with freelance projects, I still want my agent to handle it. Because it's kind of like, now I don't want to have to do all that back and forth and business and stuff like that. And so it's a lovely feeling to have somebody who can just make it happen.
Yeah.
Sarah, are you doing freelance projects on your own aside from your books?
No.
Okay.
Like, I think we all filter through the agency, because when people do reach out, I say like, please contact, Shadra, or like just Painted Words. That's a more efficient way to go through this. So I work on my own stuff just to like post on Instagram for self-promotional material, but nothing else that, involves, I try like do gallery stuff. And there was a recent thing with Enoch Pratt where I submitted to do like a window exhibition there. And that was like, I kind of initiated that by myself just because I wanted to do something in Baltimore. But yeah.
Okay. Well, we are going to open it up to questions. I just want to leave with this one thought before leaving into questions. When I was looking for an agent, and like I said, it had been some time, I talked to everybody that I knew who had an agent, because what I found was some people had 2 and 3 agents, and I knew I didn't want to go through that. And I wanted to find out, well, where were the trouble spots? What was the problem? Why did you leave? I looked at that Association for Artists Reps online, AAR, to see if there were any complaints or anything, but also places like Publishers Lunch from, they will actually tell you, which agents are doing what kind of work. But I found it was personal references that were the most helpful to find out who recommended who and what type of agent they were. And Jardine Nolan helped me by referring me to Marietta Zacher, who was just an angel. And when I wanted her as an agent, I didn't want to be obvious about it. And so I invited her to sit on a panel at Brooklyn Public Library where she was the agent. And all the questions I asked her, and I was just hoping the public got something out of it, was basically for me.
Right.
You know what I mean? I wanted to know, how are you as an agent? And every answer she gave, I was like, I want that.
Yeah.
Because she was so in love with story and just with the book, you know. It was more about the project, and that's how you sound to me, Shadra. It's most agents that I've run into, fortunately, it's not just a money business thing.
Yeah.
They love books and they love the stories and they love the illustrations.
Sure.
So we're all in good shape. Yes, but Allison, bring on questions. Make them tough. Make them tough.
So many of the questions are directed toward Shadra.
Thanks everyone.
I think one of the pieces that I'm just going to summarize a couple questions that came in, but really has to do with agents and specifically maybe your agenting style. But how far along in a project do you think someone needs to be before they go out on submission? And also, could you talk a little bit about if you really like someone's artistic style, are you willing to work with them longer to get the project right?
I'll start backwards. So if I like a person's style, I don't know what that means longer. I'm willing to work until we sell the book, you know? And so that with Sarah, I was like, we're gonna get this book sold, the end. I don't care what we have to do. I love this story so much. We're gonna make it happen. But there have been plenty of students who've had amazing arts. I mean, I teach, so I get to see some amazing artists come in. But it's not just about the art style for me. Like I love style, but I also love storytelling. And in terms of how far along does a project have to be before I submit it? I want it to be as close as finished as possible. You know, with all of them, we submit a complete sketch dummy and finished sample. So maybe 3 finished pieces of art along with the sketch dummy. Now that we have a working relationship with an editor, I can like soft pitch a project to see if they'd be interested in something before we then spend like a month or 2 working on a dummy or a first chapter. So Sarah's working on a graphic novel pitch now, and we're working on like a whole chapter before we take it, because people need to understand, if an editor likes a project, they don't always have time to help shape it with you. They want a project that's ready to go to acquisitions, that they can like take it and have people get behind it and sell it. So make sure that it's as polished as possible before you take it to the table.
I'll turn that, I think, on to Sarah and Pat a little bit here, because you both have working relationships with your agents. How close do you want to get a project before you share it with your agent? Are you pitching ideas with your agent? Are you saying, you know, this is something I was working on, this is a character sketch, do you think this is something?
Pat, do you want to go ahead?
Well, yeah, because I'm very late to the game with agents, and I probably should apologize to Maddie. I really never know. So sometimes I've shown her snippets. Do you know what I mean? When I first was trying to sell Trace, it was a whole finished manuscript. And even then I was a little hesitant to send it to her because it was like a lot of words. But I sent it to her, and she reacted pretty quickly to it. Somebody got the phone. With the other things, now I will give her story ideas. The last book that she took of mine, I just gave her a few chapters. But again, I've never even asked her, is this too little to show you or too much, you know, whatever. She doesn't give me some kind of like a limitation on what I can show. So I've shown her some ideas, and she might give me feedback like, yeah, this would be pursuing. I actually told her, I think, a paragraph, and she was like, oh yeah, develop that. So I think a lot of agents are kind of flexible. I don't know. Shadra, I suspect is.
What, flexible?
Uh-huh.
I mean, we're all artists, right? And I think, you know, coming to the game as an artist, I get that. I get the rough idea and being able to just kind of do the creative brain play to see what a project can be, to get everyone excited. You know, I have a client that I'm working on with a couple of manuscripts now, and there's just been a lot of back and forth about, okay, this works, this doesn't work. What do we want to do? Let's throw this at it and see if it sticks. And then they go back and develop it. So yeah, I love the whole, like, let me see what you're working on. But I still, again, I try to be very careful to not insert myself too much in what I want it to be. It's a lot of playing therapist. So tell me about your mother. What is the story really about?
You know what the problem is with that, because I see this at a lot of conferences too, though, Allison, is that people come with ideas and they may have, that's may be as far as it's ever going to get. And I don't know that agents have a whole lot of time to just listen to what you want to do.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? So I think you need to know, like the stuff that I have shown Marietta is stuff that I'm actually trying to develop. And I know that I'm serious about it. So I wouldn't take stuff to her just frivolous, like, oh, what do you think about this? Because I drew this frog this morning and he's really cool.
Right. No,
You know, I would develop it a bit.
Yeah, and that kind of it ties into a few of the other questions. You know, we're talking about these ideas and these sparks, and you know, I can imagine that you know you're journaling or you're sketching every day, and so something comes out of that, and then that idea leads you down the path. But some of the questions are really about structuring when you're not working with an agent or an editor, or you're not in, you know, an advanced illustration class with Shadra. How do you kind of keep yourself accountable? What strategies or tips might you have for people who are trying to gather those ideas and keep working when they're not maybe actively in that publishing partnership?
Yeah. I think groups are helpful. If you can get with an illustrator group or writing group, that always helps motivation. I know, Pat, you said when you were working on Trace, you had a writers group and it forced you to like produce. It forced you
to have a group.
Yeah, had to have a group. So you can find accountability through your peer groups for sure. You know, in terms of assignments, I know a lot of people say, oh, I'm not in class. So what types of assignments, how can I generate that? I'll give you one thing that I give my students and myself is write a list of 100 things that interest you. Just dump it out of your head. 100 things that you're curious about, that you want to draw, and then see what you can fuse together to come up with some stories. That's one way. I love poetry. I write poetry, and I love going to the Poetry Foundation, poetry.org, and looking at poems and making illustration. That's actually an assignment that I give to my class as well. So yeah, those are two.
For me, it's journaling, actually. Yeah. Like I just write every day, and then that, because Shadra, she says like, tell me about your mother, you know, like all the stories that you make, it comes from like you, right? Like it comes from like what you believe in and like how, like what you want to put out there, what you want to say. So I think like the basis of that for me personally has been journaling every day, and that's easy. That eventually turns into some sort of story, I think.
For me, I've got three things. One is read, right? I'm doing a lot of reading for this research on this book that I'm working on, and there are these side characters that are just like, what? And I'm making notes to myself, like, I'm going to go, it's like one thing leads to another, and a little trail. Like even when I was doing the research for Trace, I came across that Jesse James was a Pony Express rider at the age of 12. I'm like, what? You know, there's all kinds of little tidbits scattered all over the place. When I did the program last week with Dan and Mike, Dan was saying that book he did, Lift, with Min Lee wrote, was, you know how many times you've gotten on an elevator and there's a little kid on the elevator who wants to push the button? Yeah. He turns it into a story. I mean, we're surrounded by ideas and things that should motivate you, right? But the other thing was, one of my students came back from Japan and she had a stack of folders. And in those folders, some folders only had like sketches. Some had a little snippet of a story. Some had a manuscript. Some had thumbnails. But whatever she had come up with, she stuck into a different folder for each story idea. And what I found is that there's no real downtime, because I will go and get something out of one of those folders and work on it. And the last book I did, the last picture book I did, all I had was a sketch. Like a little girl, she had done this stick figures of her parents, and I couldn't stop laughing when I saw it, because she was going to hand this to a policeman to help find her mom or dad if they went missing, right? And I showed that to an editor, and she's like, let's do it. And I'm like, there's no story. But that way, you kind of put a gun to your own forehead and make yourself get a story going. So sometimes it's just an image. It's just like Sarah said, journaling. Whatever it is, at least start organizing it, so that you know when you're ready to work on something, you can go pick up one of those stories and it'll get, fire you up again.
Exactly. Exactly. Someone in the chat, and I do want to answer this because I think this is important also. They said, what happens if Sarah's in love with a project and I'm not? Then what happens? And as an agent, my job is to represent my client, you know, so it's not about me, it's about the stories that she wants to tell. And so I would say, let's get this in the best shape possible. And I would find the editors who might be interested in that type of story. So it's not about ego, which is really important. It's not about ego at all. It's about supporting the storyteller, and that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's so important too, because I think, you know, Pat has been talking about the relationship, communication, and to be able to be sure that the agent that you're working with is someone that you can have that kind of communication with. What are the other, because we have talked a lot about communication, we've talked about this as a partnership, but you know, if we're looking at the relationship as a whole, what are some other touch points that you look for with your agent relationship? So you want to be able to have open communication with them. You want them to do what? What do you think would be other
I want them to be like, I love so I've been on client visits with Lori when I was early in my career. She would take me out with her to show books so I could see exactly what she did, what it looks like. And I loved how excited people were to see her. Like Lori is such a, just a really cool person. And she has this really great relationship with a lot of editors outside of the business, right? So I just like those interpersonal relationships. That's really important to me. It helps that she's in New York. You know, I definitely want an agent that's in the city where the industry is. That's very helpful. But yeah, that's the biggest thing for me, I think.
I want to add something, because what I didn't realize until I signed up with Marietta is that the overview is so valuable. For us, we like to create what we sit at home and we work. And that's what we like to do. Signing on with Marietta, I realized she had this overview. She could come back and explain to me what different marketing plans meant, you know, who was going to do what, which different publishers might do different things. And I had no overview. At all whatsoever, because I would think, ooh, what editor do I like? Right. You know, what editor? And it was a very limited not myopic, but tunnel vision with a project. Do you know what I mean? Whereas I think agents can look at the whole big picture and figure out where's the best possible chance for this book.
Sure.
You know, this type of book. And that overview, no.
Yeah.
I don't know that you even want to go, Shadra, you're going to have to acquire that, but if you don't already have it. But it's a lot of work.
It is a lot of work. Well, I work under an umbrella of two very capable full-time agents. And so I don't have to do all of that, but I've always been aware of houses and sort of like, I just watch the industry. You know, you go to enough of like BEA and you see how much money people are putting behind their books, and you see like the marketing plans and things that are playing out in front of you, and you take note of that. You know, it's like, okay, well, you know, this company is doing a banner and they have their client on stage, you know, they're doing like 10 different talks or what have you. That's important to see, you know, if your company's going to get behind the project. Yeah.
Sarah, would you add anything to that? I think that those are
that was good.
Yeah. That's wonderful. I am going to ask one more question, and this is adjacent to the theme of today, which was about relationships between agents and illustrators. But there's so many questions about where, Shadra, people might be able to interact with you as a teacher. You've talked a lot about your teaching. People are very excited by the tips that you've been sharing, and they're wondering, are there places where you teach often? If they're not enrolled in MICA, where else can they learn from you?
I had an online class with craftsy.com and they went out of business. So my online class is kaput now. It's just so sad, but.
Is this a tip to get Shadra to do a Highlights Foundation class?
Highlights Foundation.
On the spot like that.
I'm always at the Highlights Foundation every summer. You can
at your own cabin.
No, but you did have an online class, right? And it does sound like that you do not have any longer, but you are teaching online in other ways, and people could enroll in MICA, right?
Yeah, well, so I don't teach online anymore. I mean, well, now thanks to COVID-19, we will have to do that in the fall. But I'm a full-time illustration. I run the interim chair of the illustration department at MICA, Maryland Institute College of Art. You can take classes there. I know that's a big, heavy lift. But right now, I mean, I would be interested in doing some other online things. I just don't know what that looks like now. And it's also exhausting. So I try to scale back just a little bit, but I don't have any plans to do any one-on-one. I might join one of Pat's boot camps. I think that's a fantastic resource. If you ever want to have eyes on the project and be led through the steps, you should definitely look into taking boot camp, which Pat said will be online at some point.
Yes. Shadra said to me 10 years ago, why don't you take boot camp online? And I was like, no, I can't think. And now I'm getting so used to it through classes. Yeah, I'm planning to do a boot camp online this summer. I just haven't announced it.
Yeah.
But the thing is, it's like you only teach undergraduate, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so do I. So it's it's a hard thing. I've actually let people sit in and mentor the classes until they get thrown out by the administration. We used to have a woman, I just gotta tell you this, she was 60 years old when she came to the Parsons class. I don't know if she's watching, but we called her Cookie Lady because she brought cookies, really good, high quality cookies.
I remember
You remember Cookie Lady? And Cookie Lady came, and after about, maybe a year, Cookie Lady got an agent. And about 6 months later, Cookie Lady sold her book.
Hey!
And I was like, I love this. I love this. It's never too late.
You should be an agent. Why aren't you doing the agenting thing?
Okay, thank you, George. We're about to wrap this up, right? No, sweetie.
A lot of putting people on the spot here.
You know what I'm saying? It's getting ugly.
Oh, this has been great. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. Thank you. And Sarah, congratulations. We're looking forward to your book. The cover is stunning.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Tell us the pub date again. When does it come out?
Oh, it's this October or this fall. Yeah.
Okay.
Very soon.
Awesome.
Someone else is asking for sketches. I think all of us have social media platforms, so that's usually where you can find sort of the sketches that people post. So I would definitely check everyone out on Instagram and Facebook or your social media platform of choice.
Thank you so much. That was a wonderful, wonderful panel. Thank you.
Guys.
Great way
Thank you, Allison and George.
Bye, all.
Thanks.
Bye.
See you guys.